Hi, I'm Theresa and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be recommending you some books that are perfect to read during Pride Month or any month. You know, queer books exist year-round. But yes, I am really excited to be doing this. I actually filmed a Pride Book Recs video about 2 years ago now when I first started my channel and I first started reading queer books. So I just wanted to kind of update that list a bit because I hadn't read half the books on it. It probably leaned quite MLM rather than a full mix of different representation and so on and so forth. So I thought I'd do an updated version. When I've been making this list, I've tried to capture a lot of different queer experiences, which I'll talk about as I recommend each individual book. I've tried to get lots of different gender identities, sexual identities, different intersections, maybe with race, religion, different genres, just a whole bunch of books, so there should hopefully be something in here for everyone. And can I just say, while I'm filming this queer book recommendations video, that I miss having my shelves at home with my rainbow at the back and everything behind me. So if you don't know, this is my flat where I'm renting, where I'm staying in Spain, but I will be back home in a few weeks. Scary thought, and we'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming with the nice shelves behind me. But in the meantime, we can deal with whatever these books are. It's not great taste. Anyway, without further ado, let's just start the video. So the first book I want to recommend is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This is a YA historical fiction book that's really kind of taken the world by storm, and it's so well deserved. It's such a good book. So this follows Lily, who is growing up in 1950s Chinatown. This is during the time of the Red Scare. There's kind of threats of deportation hanging over her family, and you just follow her and the struggle she's going through at this time, but also realizing that she's a lesbian and getting involved in the lesbian bar scene, especially after she gets talking to this girl at her school called Kath, and she introduces her to this scene. And it's just such a good, powerful book, just seeing this part of history that's left so often uncovered. Like, this is a queer Asian woman, young woman in the 1950s, interested in STEM. Like, that's not the history that we often see. So it was just really lovely getting to know this character and see what was going on for her, and just getting to know the lesbian bar scene at this time. I find that so interesting. I really need to do some like non-fiction reading up on that because it's just so interesting to me, but I feel like you got a really good kind of introduction to it in this book. And I just think it's important to look back at LGBTQ plus history this time of year especially, but in general. And that's definitely something I need to work on because I don't read a lot of non-fiction, but it's something I want to try doing. And I think this is a really good place to start with historical fiction instead, but you're still exploring this very true scene. This is probably a story for some girl out there. And yes, it's just a really good fun book. I really liked Lily as a narrator. I really empathized with her and liked seeing the world from her perspective. I loved the scenes in the lesbian bar. There's just this sense of community that, oh, I love it. And it's just such a good book, and I definitely recommend you pick it up. So next up is my favourite book of all time. I couldn't not include it, okay? And that is the Falling in Love Montage by Kira Smith. This is a YA rom-com with lesbian main characters as well, and I just love it so much. I'm going to actually be rereading it this summer and maybe doing a vlog of me like annotating it, so stay tuned for me to go fully back into my Falling in Love Montage stan phase. Like, I was obsessed with it when I read it 2 years ago now, and I'm wanting to get back to that point. But anyway, this follows Saoirse, who's a bit of a romance cynic. I say a bit, she's very much a romance cynic. She's had some bad experiences and she's decided that she's just not interested in dating, you know, it's not doing much for her. But then she meets Ruby, and the two kind of instantly hit it off, but since Saoirse's decided she's not dating anyone, they have to work around that, and their idea is to have this falling in love montage where they do all the cute dates and cliches from rom-com movies because the girl Saoirse meets Ruby, she's obsessed with them, and she wants to show Theresa the power of love and all that. And so they decide to have this kind of going on dates but not dating kind of thing going on. And of course, what the girls forget is that by the end of the falling in love montage, the characters have fallen in love. So I adore this book. It is, as I've said, my favourite book of all time. I feel like Kira Smith just writes characters so well. Like, they just feel alive. They are so three-dimensional, so easy to understand and to connect with, and I just adore them. And she writes humor really well. Like, it's definitely a rom-com. Like, there's lots of funny bits. I just love the two of them together. They're so cute. I love their different dynamics with like a kind of grumpy sunshine, romantic cynic, hopeless romantic, all of these kind of tropes, I suppose. They just work so well with the characters in the story, and I just really enjoyed my time reading it. Next up, I want to recommend Felix Ever After by Case and Calendar. This is another YA contemporary novel, and this follows Felix, who really just wants to fall in love. But he kind of secretly worries that he's one marginalization too many. You know, he's black, he's queer, he's trans, he's poor, he's all of this, and he just thinks maybe that's too much. But when a student starts sending him anonymous transphobic messages and posts his dead name and pictures of him before he transitions up in the school, he begins this kind of catfishing scenario to try and figure out who it is, and ends up in a quasi love triangle, and it's very dramatic. But I just adored this book. I read it in like one sitting, back again nearly 2 years ago now, and I just loved it so much. It's so good. I just really felt for Felix. I love the romance and this developing love triangle we've got going on and how it resolves, and it's like, yes, this is what I was rooting for. And I just love this story, this Felix coming to terms with his identity and this self-love he's got going on, as well as romantic love and just the friendships in this book. It's just such a lovely, touching story. I really want to actually reread it because I don't remember it very well, but I absolutely loved it. I remember that much at least. Next up, I want to recommend I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. This is another one I read a couple of years ago, so again, apologies if I don't remember it perfectly and can't talk about it as much as I would like. So this follows Ben, who comes out to their parents as non-binary and is kicked out of the house. They are forced to move in with their estranged sister and her partner and attend a new school. And they decide to just go completely stealth there, just not come out to anyone because it's not worth all of this hurt and harm that happened last time. And this is compounded by them struggling with an anxiety disorder. However, they make a friend at the school. They make a few friends at the school, which I love. I love their friend group. But one of them is Nathan, who is just sunshine personified. He's so lovely, and he really helps bring Ben out of their shell, and they just fall in love. You know, it's a cute little contemporary romance book, and this relationship with Nathan is just so sweet and heartwarming, as well as Ben kind of connecting with their family again. I mean, their sister, and just, I don't know, I just loved it. It was such a lovely story. It's again one that I just flew through. I missed reading books that quickly. I don't know what I was on. Actually, no, it was lockdown I read it, so that'll be why. I had nothing else to do. But I was just, I connected with it so much. I really felt for Ben, and I loved this book so much. I think it was the first book I've read that had a non-binary main character, so again, that was really nice to see. And I just really enjoyed this book. I'm looking forward to reading more from Mason Deaver. I know their new release, The Feeling of Falling in Love, sounds right up my alley. So definitely they're an author to check out for other books. They've all got non-binary main characters, I believe, so definitely there'll be one for you somewhere. But yes, this is just such a lovely story. Again, great friendships, great romance. You see Ben dealing with their mental health and art and family and all of that. It's such a good book. Next up is Loveless by Alice Oseman. So this follows Georgia, who's beginning university, her first year, and she goes to the same university as her friends, and it's all going to be this great experience, and she's going to fall in love because she loves love, but she's just never fallen in love herself. But as dating attempts go from disastrous to worse, and she begins to feel like she's drawing away from her friends as they all have new university experiences, she begins to question whether she really wants to or even can fall in love at all, and comes to the realization that she's aromantic, asexual. And we follow her journey with this, with her friend group, trying to save a Shakespeare society, meeting new friends, and it's just such a lovely book. I really related to Georgia's character in this kind of expectations for your first year of university and things not quite going to plan, and just some of the feelings that she has throughout the book. I was like, oh yeah, that's me. Yeah. I just really enjoyed reading this book. I gave it 5 stars. It was so good. I gave all of these 5 stars. All but like 2, I think, I gave 5 stars. So you know I love all these books on this list. And Loveless is such a good, touching book. If you have read Heartstopper, I definitely recommend you pick up some of Alice's prose novels because they are just as good. And yes, that actually brings me on to the next book I want to recommend, which is Heartstopper, the graphic novels. If you've somehow not read these or seen the show, I recommend you do at least one, if not both, but probably both. These graphic novels, this show, they're just the most touching, heartwarming story of 2 boys becoming friends and falling in love. And you've got an amazing friend group alongside them with with other queer characters, trans characters, everything. And I just want to be part of this friend group. Like, I love them all so much. And I just love getting to see them brought to life in the screen as well from the graphic novels. I do have a review of the show up if you want to watch that and see if you want to watch the show, but I definitely recommend you do. And yes, this follows Nick and Charlie, who are assigned to sit next to each other in their all-boys school, and this begins this friendship between the 2 of them that blossoms into something more, and you just follow them falling in love, and it's so sweet. And then later as the graphic novels go, you deal very heavily with Charlie's mental health struggles, so like be aware of that before going in. But it's just, even as we get quite deep into his struggles, it's still this lovely, touching, heartwarming story, still overall joyous, queer joy, all of that good stuff. I just so thoroughly loved it. It's so sweet, and I definitely recommend you pick it up. Next up, I want to recommend the Henna Wars by Adiba Jagirdar. This is another YA contemporary romance novel. I know this list leans very contemporary, that's just mostly what I read, but there are some fantasy books later on, don't worry. But yes, this is a rivals to lovers romance book, and you follow Nishat, who after coming out to her parents as a lesbian is told that no, that's just not possible for a Muslim girl, for a Bengali girl. And so she is very much dealing with this, and this problem is compounded when her childhood friend walks back into her life, Flavia. And the 2 of them kind of reconnect, and Nishat begins to develop a crush. But when both girls set up rival henna businesses for their school enterprise thing, this turns into a fierce rivalry because henna is not a part of Flavia's culture and she's appropriating this, and there's some very heavy discussions on cultural appropriation versus appreciation and such. But the story is mostly the romance between Nishat and Flavia, and they just have so many cute moments. I really enjoyed them both together. I feel like a broken record, but you know, these are all favorites for a reason. It's because I love them. So yes, I want to talk about them and say how much I love them. And I chose this book for this list because I love how the author explores the intersection of being queer, being Bengali, and being Muslim, and how how being a lesbian can exist with these other 2, and how that experience may be different for other people, especially if you read Adiba's other book, Hani and Isha's Guide to Fake Dating. You get a different experience of being queer and Bengali and Muslim. And yes, I just adored the Henna Wars. I read it so fast, I had the best time. I actually did a reading vlog, which I'll link down below if you want some more thoughts on it, especially since I don't feel like I can talk about it that much here because A, I have lots of books, and B, it's been a while since I read it. And yes, it's just such a lovely, lovely book, and I definitely recommend it. The book I want to recommend next is 1500 Miles from the Sun by Johnny Garthavia. This is another YA romance novel, and I just, again, adored it, loved it so much. So this follows Jules, who lives in a Latino community in Texas, and he has this very set plan for his life that he is going to stay in a closet until he gets to his dream university, and then he's going to come out and live his best openly gay life. But one night he makes a mistake in getting very, very drunk and accidentally tweeting that he is in fact gay and outing himself basically to everyone he knows. And so you follow him dealing with the repercussions of this, and it can get quite dark at times, so like be aware of that going in. Although this book, like Heartstopper, I said, overall light tone, you feel the love, you feel this love between all the characters. It's very good and overall uplifting. What helps is that after Jules comes out, his Twitter crush Matt from California slides into his DMs, and they begin kind of connecting and building this relationship, this long distance relationship, and it's just the sweetest thing. And I, before I read this book, wasn't sure how I felt about reading a long distance relationship like built over Twitter. I thought there might be some difficulties building the connection between them, but you do not have to worry about that. It was done so well. I felt so hard for both the characters and their relationship with each other. I just loved this book. I loved how also very Chicano it is, in that it's very much, Jules is very much part of this community, and in the way that, say, they speak and language is written in the book, there's little bits of Spanish, and it's done in such a very nice, natural way that this is definitely just how they speak. And it's also done so cleverly that there's never a translation, but even to a non-Spanish speaker it makes sense. I am a Spanish speaker, but a lot of this would be more slang local to this area, whereas I know very much Spain Spanish. So even though I do know some of it, I didn't know all of it, but I could still understand it. So I just think this is such a good book, and I definitely recommend you pick it up. It's just such a lovely book. I love it so much. The next book I want to recommend is I Kissed Char by Casey McKiston. This one is Casey McKiston's newest book. It's actually a YA contemporary when the other books have been adult romances, and it carries all of the things that I love about all of Casey's books and just makes it for a YA audience. It's still an amazing, amazing book. And you know, a Pride recommendations list would not be complete without a Casey McKiston book, in my opinion. So I had to include one. But I thought I'd include Char because this book deals very heavily with being queer in the South and how this can present differently for different people. So this follows Chloe Green, who has this kind of fierce rivalry with the it girl of her school, Char Wheeler. But when Char kisses her and then disappears, Chloe's determined to find out where she's gone. She's not going to win valedictorian by default because Char isn't there. She wants to beat her. And when she sneaks into Char's bedroom to look for clues, she comes across the kind of bad boy of their school, and the two of them realize that Char kissed them both before she disappeared, and then they rope in Char's boyfriend because the clues that Char has left, these little pink notes, seem to be for the three of them. And they all three begin working together to find Chara, and they also learn more about themselves and each other, and there's this amazing friend group that I love so much. Casey McKiston does friend groups and characters in general just so well. I love the friends in this book. I want to be friends with them. I love it. And yes, as I said, this very much explores being queer in the South in a little Bible Belt town, especially as Char, I believe, is the preacher's daughter, and just what being queer means in these communities. And you also follow Chloe, who's not from the South originally. She's from California. She's been out since she was little, and seeing her begin to understand these different experiences, and just, I don't know, I just love it so much. Though, of course, by nature of this book, be careful because it does deal with the religious homophobia. but it's not a huge part of this book. All of these books, some of them will deal with other things, some hard-hitting topics, but none of them sensationalize it, none of them are like really traumatic books. They are overall all lighthearted, so you're fine to read them. Next up is The Midnight Lie by Marie Rakotsky. Finally, a fantasy book! So this follows Nirim, who lives in the ward, this kind of section of their island city reserved for the poorer, lower classes. And in this society, the lower classes have no access to luxuries, whether that's sweets or wearing colour or anything like that. They live a very harsh, very controlled life. And so when Nirim ends up in prison, as many people from the ward do for the slightest little infractions, she meets Sid. Sid is a foreigner, which is very, very strange because this island doesn't get foreigners. They believe that they are the only people ever, just this island. And Sid and Nirim connect, and Sid says that she can show her more of this island, explore its secrets, and she can show her magic, because the upper classes of the society have access to this magic, and Sid wants to know how, wants to know what's going on really, and she ropes Nirim into this journey, and you follow the two of them uncovering the secrets of the society. And I just adore this book. It's one of my favorites. Sid and Nirim, their romance, it like made me feral. I will link down the vlog where I read it, because I don't think I can sell you on this book as much as I can in that video where I was just going mental reading it. Their romance is so good. There's just so many lines between them that I loved. And I also really love in this series that it deals with compulsive heterosexuality, which is something a lot of lesbians struggle with. And seeing this explored in a fantasy setting with this idea that because you've been raised in this very heteronormative society, it doesn't even occur to you that you can be a lesbian, that you can like women, that that's okay, and all of that. Seeing that explored in fantasy was so interesting, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it's just overall a fantastic book. It's the first in a duology, though the duology is complete, so I definitely recommend going and picking it up. Next up, I want to recommend Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This is a kind of contemporary fantasy, magical realism type book. This follows Yadriel, who is determined to prove to his family that he's a real brujo, because after he came out as trans, they just wouldn't see him for the boy that he is. And to do this, he attempts to summon the ghost of his murdered cousin. However, he instead manages to summon the ghost of the bad boy of his school. And Julian, this bad boy, he won't leave. He ends up stuck with Yadriel because he wants to know what happened, how he's dead. He has some loose ends to tie up. And so you follow them trying to figure out what happened to Julian, trying to just help him tie up his loose ends and check in on everyone. But of course, the two begin to develop feelings for each other. And this is just, again, such an amazing book. I really enjoyed this kind of society of brujos that is explored in the book, and in the way it harkens back to different Latino mythologies and cultures and everything. And again, I love the romance, I love the characters, and I just really love the relationship that developed between Yadriel and Jules, the kind of banter and everything between them, and then everything becoming something more. I just really, really enjoyed this book. Definitely recommend you pick it up. Next up, I want to recommend The Passing Playbook by Isaac Fitzsimons. This is another YA contemporary romance book that I've just really, really loved. So this follows Spencer, who joins a new school after a year of really transphobic bullying after he came out. And at this new school, he seems to have everything. Friends, even a blossoming romance, his soccer team, everything's going great. But the issue is that he's not out, he's just passing. And so when a discriminatory law forces Spencer's football coach to bench him, he has to make the choice between fighting for his right to play or existing on the sidelines but remaining stealth. And I just love this book. From the synopsis, it sounds a lot more activism focused as Spencer fights for this right to play or not. However, it's definitely more romance focused, and I just really, really enjoyed that. And I really love the relationship between Spencer and Justice, and there's kind of thing that they had going on. It was just very cute. I really, really enjoyed it, especially because Justice was struggling with some family issues of his own. He comes from a very, very, very Christian family, and he knows that there would be problems with them knowing he's queer, with him dating a trans guy, etc. And I just enjoyed his journey as well, and Spencer and his friends and everything. I just loved it so much. This book felt like a warm hug. It's so comforting and sweet, and just there's so much love in this book. I loved it so much, and I just so highly recommend it. It's such a lovely, lovely book. The next book I want to recommend is It Goes Like This by Neil Moreland. This is another one of my absolute favourites. It's a YA contemporary novel, and you follow 4 members of a queer pop group a couple of years after their group broke up, as they have to reconnect for a kind of charity benefit concert. And there's a sapphic romance, there's 2 lesbian characters, a bi character, a pansexual character who's also non-binary. There's just so much going on in this book, and I loved it. I loved getting to read from all 4 perspectives. I thought that they all added so much to the story, and there's never a time, as you sometimes get when you're reading multi-perspective books, where I thought like, oh, can we just like move it on to somebody else, please? Like, everyone had such a clear, important role in the book. I enjoyed reading from them all, and I loved getting to see like what they all thought of each other years after breaking up, and like the outside perspective on the romance and everything, and just as these all had like old friendship feelings as well, because they were all friends for so long before the band broke up, and just reconnecting, a second chance romance and all of that stuff. I love it. I love all these like friends to lovers, old feelings, and I really enjoyed getting to see this in a kind of second chance setting, and it was just such a lovely, heartwarming book. Again, you know, I have a type, I love heartwarming, touching books, and this was definitely one of them. It was just so, so, so good. I love these characters so much, and just the love for music, and exploring a bit of the music business and being openly queer in it. There's a bit of fandom exploration, which is something I really enjoy in books, and it's just overall such a good story. I love seeing these people reconnect, and oh. Next up is Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. This is an adult contemporary novel, and this follows Grace, who's just finished her PhD in astronomy, and she's not quite sure what to do with her life. But for her graduation, she goes to Vegas, parties it up with her friends, but ends up marrying this girl she's never met before called Yuki. And we follow Grace after graduating and trying to kind of ease into this adult world and finding a job and everything, but also really, really struggling with her mental health, and also remembering this woman who she briefly fell in love with and married, and wanting to connect with her again. And you follow their reconnection, their romance, but mostly just Grace dealing with her mental health and kind of navigating this world as a graduate. And I just really, really enjoyed this book so much. The writing is so beautiful. I adored it. It's short, it's sweet, and it's really touching, really hit home a lot of the times with Grace's kind of loneliness almost, and struggles with mental health, and I just adored it so much. And the romance was so lovely as well. There's also Yuki, Grace's wife. She has this podcast or radio show, where she talks to other lonely people, and it's such a beautiful little story, and it just felt so touching. I loved it. And this also navigates being a Black, queer woman in academia, as well as just the struggles of being any new graduate trying to find a job, and it's just so, so, so good. Next up we have got Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This is another one of my all-time favorites. This is a sci-fi kind of fantasy horror blend, which is really fun. And you follow Gideon, who is indentured to the ninth house in this kind of world where there are 9 houses in the galaxy or universe. I don't really understand space. And there's 9 houses of necromancer families, and she's indentured to the 9th house. And she's plotting her escape at the beginning of the novel, but she is thwarted once again by Harrow Hark, the reverend daughter of the 9th house, because Harrow needs a cavalier, a swordswoman, and Gideon is the only viable option, because Harrow has been called by the kind of leader of everything to become a new lictor, this all-powerful, immortal necromancer warrior, and she needs Gideon to be her cavalier so she can enter. And you follow the two of them traveling to this distant planet to be basically trapped in this old house with candidates from all the other houses as they compete to solve these dangerous puzzles to figure out how to become this warrior. And I just loved the relationship between Harrow and Gideon. There's no romance yet. I'm holding out hope. But they have what I think could possibly be the best enemies to lovers dynamic if it goes that way. They have such an amazing enemies moment, and then seeing them in this first book beginning to develop real feelings for each other, this friendship between them, all acknowledging their shared history and everything, is so amazing. I love them so much. And I also just enjoyed the magical competition aspect, all the different houses and all the different people from the other houses and them all competing with each other, the dynamic between them where they don't really know like who to trust because people start dying, and it's just such a fun story, like so weird and out there, but it just works so well. Gideon has this amazing humor in her narration as well, which I love. It's just overall a fantastic book. I'm so excited for Nona the Ninth, which is the 3rd book releasing this year. I cannot wait. The final book I want to recommend is Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez. This is another YA contemporary rom-com, and this follows Darcy, who's been giving anonymous love advice in her school, but when the popular boy in her school, Broham, catches her in the act of taking these letters from her locker, which is all meant to be anonymous for good reason, he ropes her into helping him reconnect with his ex-girlfriend, and she needs to do this to keep her identity secret, so the two begin working together. And they, of course, begin to get closer and fall in love. And I just really enjoyed this story. Darcy is bisexual, and this is such an important part of the book as we navigate just being bisexual and having feelings for two people of two different genders, and also the biphobia she faces, especially also internalized biphobia. There's this really touching scene where she talks about it, which I know a lot of my bisexual friends who have read this book have been like very in love with that scene, felt really moved and touched by it because it felt so very true to them. And I just really wanted to recommend this book, to have a book with an MF pairing that's queer, because I feel like that's often left out of Pride recommendation lists or LGBTQ plus recommendations lists. You know, people don't see bi people in an MF relationship as queer, but they are. Who you're in a relationship with does not define your identity, and you are equally as queer whether you are in an MF or FF relationship if you're, say, for example, a bi woman. Anyway, what else I loved about this book was just the writing style. It was so fun and engaging. I just flew through it. And I just really enjoyed seeing this relationship develop with Braham, seeing them go from like banter and friends to something more. And also Darcy had a crush on her friend, and seeing how that was dealt with as well was just really good. And I really enjoyed the book. And yes, that is the end of the video. Finally, I know it's been a bit of a long one, but hopefully that means that there's a book in here for everyone. I would really appreciate it if you left a like, maybe a comment too, saying if you've read any of these books or what's on your TBR this Pride Month. I'd love to know. And subscribe if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. And I will also have Goodreads links for all of these books down below if you want to learn more about them, as well as my reviews. And as always, I will also have my social media if you want to keep up with me elsewhere. And yes, just thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. Happy Pride Month, and I'll see you in another video soon.